It's a pretty rare occurrence here at the Question that a personal story of mine makes its way into a presentation. It's happened twice before. First time in December 2015. I shared a story of an unlikely, possibly non-coincidental reunion with a friend who I hadn't seen in 3 years. She had a minor bicycle accident on the street right in front of a house that we had just moved into that week. And we recognized each other. This is not a picture of her, by the way. We recognized each other when I ran out to see if this unknown person was okay. She had this accident right in front of our house. This story helped me introduce one of our favorite questions about synchronicity, which is something I always try and get into every presentation. It's one of my favorite presentations and one of the favorite questions that we started. Then in June 2016, I shared another personal story of a summer holiday trip from my childhood. It's a story about an unexpected roadside stop, courtesy of my father, who was responding to his persistent and irritating little boy, which led to a sublime drink from a tiny waterfall in the mountains of BC. Now, I told this story to provoke the question about whether we are intentional enough about stopping to ask the important questions that may change our lives forever. Now, this community has always been kind to my personal stories and have quietly accepted the notion that they are a kind of complementary personal connection to the larger questions that we hope to provoke here. I have also thought that my stories might just prompt each person to connect with their own personal stories, those stories of yours that may not have provoked questions at the time they occurred, but perhaps might become questions because of this community. I mean, that's why we're here, really, to encourage and even inspire you to a fresh perspective on your own personal stories and to provoke important personal questions. Which brings me to what just happened to me about 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, I need to rephrase that, which brings us to what just happened to us, myself and David, who's sitting right over there. He was a real live eyewitness to my personal history about 2 weeks ago. I had just picked up David from his home in Kincora. It sounds a bit like a soulful Irish ballad, and this is coincidentally in this presentation. Emer is here from Ireland. I know Kincora, home in Kincora, sounds a bit like a soulful Irish ballad, but it's really a subdivision in a part of Calgary that's just kind of foreign to me. Anyway, it was a day or so after the last big snowfall, and as usual, the residential streets, this is actually Kincora, were very slick with polished snow and even a little black ice. Now, as we made our way down a slight hill toward the main intersection of Bennington Trail, I started to brake gradually and carefully as we approached the intersection. Now, there was a car ahead of us in the distance already, stopped at the traffic lights as I was creeping down this hill. Now, I'm going to declare right here and now that I am a very careful driver. Okay, and as I have an eyewitness, David, in this very room, I'm sure that he will back me up completely in this declaration of my unimpeachable care and attention behind the wheel. Anyway, like I said, we were moving very slowly down this slight incline to the intersection and the stationary vehicle in front of us, with plenty of room to spare, theoretically. Now, I was braking carefully, as I said, and we were literally moving at around 5 miles an hour, I think, as we approached the vehicle in front of us. Then, approximately 40 feet from that stationary vehicle, our vehicle hit a small runway of black ice. We didn't really speed up, okay, or lose control exactly. We just did not slow down, okay? So my anti-lock brakes engaged in that weird staccato pulsation, which seemed to help, and we started to slow down a little. But now, we were only about 20 feet from that vehicle in front of us, and we were still sliding. Sliding ever so slowly. Okay, now we're going about maybe 3 miles an hour or less now, but in a kind of surreal slow, like when they switch to a slow motion in a B-grade action movie scene. Okay, now some of you who have been in a black ice related fender bender, and I don't know, have anyone been in a fender bender on black ice? Okay, will agree with me that when I say this, in that the last 20 feet before you are in the fender bender, one has time to think about stuff. Okay? Stuff like, is there any last second maneuver possible here? No, not with your foot on the brake and wheels locked. Okay? Stuff like, what will the impact be like? Well, thank God I'm only going 3 miles an hour. And finally, you think stuff like, so this is what it feels like to be resigned to your fate. Now that's weird, disturbing, and peaceful all at the same time. Now, we've now got about 5 feet left before impact. And we're going really, really, really slow now. So slow that it's almost the same feeling as waiting for a droplet of water to fall off the tip of a leaf. Okay, it's that slow. This last 5 feet is taking as long to travel as the previous 20 feet. So neither I nor David have said anything during this little trip down the hill. But in the last 5 feet, we finally speak. Okay. Oh my gosh, David, I think this is really going to happen. David says, I think you're right. The only thing missing is an intercom speaker declaring, brace for impact. Okay, 5 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, 1 foot. We're resigned to our fate. Okay, then, perhaps 1 or 2 inches from our fate, we hit a patch of dry pavement. And we stop. No collision. David and I were wearing suits that day. Don't ask me why. The traffic light changes, and the vehicle in front of us casually pulls away, completely unaware of this unfolding drama behind. David and I were just sitting there, literally, right? We're just sitting there for a moment, a very long moment, okay? We're lost in the stress and the wonder of what just happened. Now, for some reason, I am completely aware of the heightened fear of the last 5 feet. I'm completely puzzled by the deep, calm resignation of the last foot. Okay? I am completely awestruck by the unexpected wonder of the last few inches and the unexpected reality of the outcome it was. It was truth by inches. This truth experience could not have happened if we had been going faster. Accidents occur all the time, where the participants don't have the opportunity to react, let alone reflect. One moment we're moving at a normal or even above normal pace, and the next moment, boom, our lives have changed forever. This is truth in an instant. Now, to linger on the accident metaphor just a little longer, see if this question rings true. Okay? If we experience truth in an instant, do we wonder if an alternate truth would have been possible if we had just been moving a little more slowly and a little more intentionally? Do our intentions change when we experience truth in an instant? Because we're left with an uneasiness about the outcome and how we got there. On the other hand, do we avoid intentions that might heighten our fear or cause us to be puzzled more than we are, or render us awestruck by the wonder of an unexpected reality? Do we avoid intentions that might lead us to experience truth by inches? Now, I'm not going to dwell too long in this next point, but most of us would have to admit that generally we prefer fast over slow. Okay? Why are sprinters, not long distance runners, the stars of the Olympic Games? Now, in our community, we have a wonderful girl by the name of Shannon, who is often at our community. She is an ultra marathoner. She runs races above 26 miles, and she's quite committed to it. But we prefer sprinters, okay? How did McDonald's become the world's largest server of the same food we could prepare in our own kitchens, but won't take the time? Now, by the way, I had a Big Mac this week, actually, and it did not look like this. In 2015, Microsoft released a study on human attention span. According to that study, since the year 2000, the theoretical beginning of the digital revolution, average human attention span has decreased from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. I had no idea it was that short. In the funny but not so funny section of the same study is a note that a goldfish has an average attention span of 9 seconds, which is 1 second more than humans. This is true. Okay. A related study on the viewing habits of online video consumers bears out this fast over slow revolution for which we are both the origin and the outcome. You can see that just after 1 minute, 60 seconds, online videos lose over 50% of their viewers. Evidently, even a single minute of content is just too slow for us. The ongoing debate over the death of print, or even the death of reading, is a real thing. As print newspapers and real books give way to online news sites, ebooks, all due respect, David, podcasts and blogs, and social media, the reality of our shrinking attention span and our ongoing demand for speed are actually dictating the environment for truth itself. Truth in an instant appears to be our preference. This is either because there's just too much truth to consume now, or perhaps we just don't wish to devote our diminishing attention to truth in slow motion. Even if the truth, even if the slow motion version of the truth could take us in a completely unexpected and perhaps important new place. It appears that truth by inches is a diminishing preference right along with our attention span. Okay, so look, I'm not suggesting that you stop watching the spectacular 10-second drama of the Olympic 100 meters in favor of the lesser adrenaline rush of a 4-hour marathon. I'm not saying that we need to stop enjoying the awesomeness of McDonald's French fries in favor of the terrible microwave oven kind, okay? It's unrealistic to think that we should stop checking our phones or computers for the newest social media feed or the latest online news headlines. By the way, I thought this was a really ironic picture. It's people checking their phones standing in line for fast food. This is the reality of our world, and unfortunately the reality of our goldfish-like attention span that creates our appetite for fast truth and our subconscious distaste for slow truth. Here's another example of the reality I've just described. I understand that it's an increasing conceptual challenge to associate journalism with newspapers or literature with books. And perhaps, those ships have sailed. You may be interested to know that a recent study by the National Endowment for the Arts in the U.S. reported this troubling statistic. Between 1982 and 2015, the percentage of American adults that read any work of literature, a novel, a short story, poetry, a play, in either print or digital form, actually declined from 57 to 43%. Now that's a 32% absolute decrease in a little over 30 years. Less than 1/2 of all adults do any form of literary reading. That's disturbing. The other slow ship that sailed is the SS newspaper, the former flagship of responsible journalism. Now, Pew Research, one of the world's foremost social research organizations, recently published an extensive study on American news reading trends. It's a truly fascinating study, okay, and it illustrates the question of how we engage and pursue truth today, either instantly or by inches. You can ask yourself if it's both fascinating and maybe a little disturbing when lined up with the literature study. Here's just a few highlights from the Pew Research study. 20% of adults mainly get their news from print media. Okay, that's down from 27% in just 2013. 60% of adults mainly get their news online, and mainly through mobile devices. Okay, so of those adults, of that 60%, 30% get their news from online news sites, which are affiliated with news organizations or independent news sites, and 30% get their news from social media. 66% of adults get some news from social media. So 2/3 of us get some news from social media. And of those adults, 74% of them get it from Twitter. And the rest from the other platforms. But Twitter. So what questions within the questions of truth by inches come to mind? Okay, here's some possibilities for you. Is our shrinking attention span enabling us or disabling us in the search for truth? Are you part of the shrinking demographic that doesn't engage in reading any kind of creative literature of any kind? What is lost in us, in society, in our world, when literature in any form is no longer a focus or a source of knowledge and creativity? Even if print journalism is actually dying off, can online journalism still fulfill the responsibility of delivering authentic information, open dialogue or debate, and ultimately the best obtainable version of the truth? That's a quote from Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post. If most of us get our truth online and get it instantly from a mobile phone, what's the possible effect on truth when it's expressed in 142 characters or less? Remember that the majority of social media news is obtained via Twitter.
Yeah, the 142.
Sorry?
The 142 characters.
It's gone to like 242 now or something, right? Yeah. Okay, so truth in 242 characters and not 142. That's way, it's almost doubled. Okay? Interesting questions, though, about truth by inches. 2600 years ago, an ancient Greek storyteller named Aesop wrote an iconic fable about the pursuit of truth. It was called The Tortoise and the Hare. The fable has been interpreted in various ways. Some say it's a fable about arrogance and modesty. Some say it's about outward appearance and inner substance. Still others say it's a fable about starting and finishing. Tonight, may we add this possible interpretation, that the tortoise and the hare is about important truth that is not reached in an instant, but rather by inches. Now, I'll give you a moment to read the fable. Okay? Just read it for yourself and file it for reference. Has anyone here heard the term slow science? No? Okay.
I wasn't done yet.
Oh, sorry, Dave.
I'm actually, because I'm dyslexic, I'm horribly slow reading.
That's fine, Dave.
I wasn't finished.
That's okay. That's okay.
You're moving too fast. I recently saw this presentation that really encouraged people to consume information that were modest paced.
It's true. This is actually a metaphor for the whole truth by inches thing. I know. That's good. That's really good. It's almost like we rehearsed it, Dave.
I thought it was a trick, you know. To show us how fast we all read it. You know,
No.
Yeah, I've done as well.
Okay.
I was only a couple lines.
No, that's fine, Dave. Thank you, and thanks, Emer. I appreciate that. Okay, this is the term slow science. The slow science movement is based on the belief that science should be a slow, steady, methodical process, and that scientists should not be expected to provide quick fixes to society's problems. This is the slow science movement. The term scientific breakthrough, which we hear a lot, is actually a familiar code word for the quick fix or fast science school of thought. Okay, we all love to hear the term scientific breakthrough. Slow science supports curiosity-driven scientific research, and opposes performance targets that are driven by financial and funding objectives, academic publishing pressures, career advancement or publicity goals, or political influence. The age we live in is a full-on onslaught of wonder drugs, game-changing technology, and amazing cosmic discoveries. Just a quick note, this picture on the right is an actual composite photograph of a newly discovered galaxy taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. Scientists are actually calling this new galaxy Sombrero, which is kind of interesting. Now, we've been dazzled and impressed by an apparent scientific pace that drives the dynamic change in our own pace of living. We have grown less patient, we have grown less attentive, remember the goldfish, in our own pursuit of truth. So we have transferred this impatience to our expectations of science. Truth is now fast truth, so science must be fast science. Now, one of the best examples of this fast truth, fast science connection is the way the multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry markets their version of fast science to us. Okay, now this is a typical television ad. Hope this works, for a prescription medication.
We know a place where tossing and turning have given way to sleeping, where sleepless nights yield to restful sleep, and Lunesta can help you get there, like it has for so many people before.
When taking Lunesta, don't drive or operate machinery until you feel fully awake. Walking, eating, driving, or engaging in other activities while asleep without remembering it the next day have been reported. Abnormal behaviors may include aggressiveness, agitation, hallucinations, or confusion. In depressed patients, worsening of depression, including risk of suicide, may occur. Alcohol may increase these risks. Allergic reactions such as tongue or throat swelling occur rarely and may be fatal. Side effects may include unpleasant taste, headache, dizziness, and morning drowsiness.
Ask your doctor if Lunesta is right for you. Then get Lunesta for $0 at lunesta.com. There's a land of restful sleep. We can help you go there on the wings of Lunesta.
Wow.
I love the American.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just amazing. You know, actually, I missed one thing there, which I'll mention a little bit in this part of the presentation. Okay. Here's a question that I'm sure some of you are asking about this, about the fast science undertones of this strangely ironic television ad. Here it is. What is the deeper truth behind a government-approved, convenient sleep medication that could cause us to sleepwalk or even sleep drive, give us a headache, make us dizzy, increase our depression, provoke fatal swelling? Where would we swell, I wonder? Or cause us to have suicidal thoughts? Now, I did say that this particular ad was ironic because I wondered when I watched it, if I took Lunesta, would I actually be able to sleep while worrying about all the possible side effects? Okay? This ad is fast science. This ad is the hare in Aesop's fable. Okay? Slow science believes that we should be able to take a sleeping medication without fear of sleepwalking, sleep driving, swelling, or dying. Slow science is the tortoise. I wonder if the hare took Lunesta during the race. This is the Slow Science Manifesto from the Slow Science Academy in Berlin, Germany. Yes, there actually is a group of scientists that form the Slow Science Academy. I'm going to read it as you read it. Science needs time to think. Science needs time to read and time to fail. Science does not always know what it might be at right now. Science develops unsteadily with jerky moves and unpredictable leaps forward. At the same time, however, it creeps about on a very slow time scale, for which there must be room and to which justice must be done. Slow science was pretty much the only science conceivable for hundreds of years. Today, we argue it deserves revival and needs protection. Society should give scientists the time they need, but more importantly, scientists must take their time. We do need time to think. We do need time to digest. We do need time to misunderstand each other, especially when fostering lost dialogue between the humanities and natural sciences. We cannot continuously tell you what our science means, what it will be good for, because we simply don't know yet. Science needs time. Bear with us while we think and pursue truth by inches. Those last words I inserted. Actually, a great manifesto, not just for science, but for many other things, for creativity, as an example. By the way, I just saw a study that said over 60% of all published scientific research is not considered standalone or revolutionary, but is instead fundamentally based on previous historical research. Galileo, Newton, Edison, Einstein, Jobs. Most of the scientists that have changed history would admit to standing on the shoulders and the research of slow scientists who came before them. We are the ones who've invented the notion of fast science and truth in an instant. Most scientists know that truth is by inches. As if you needed more reminding, the history of chemistry began 1,300 years ago. The history of medicine began 2,500 years ago. The history of physics and atomic theory began 2,600 years ago. And the history of mathematics began 4,000 years ago. Talk about standing on the shoulders. Okay, so by now, I hope you're struggling a bit with the importance of the question tonight. Science is the perfect metaphor for truth itself. Slow science is a perfect metaphor for truth by inches. But beyond the metaphor, are there some important questions about your own personal search for truth in your life, in the world, or in the universe? For example, how are we to search for personal truth when information and attention span are inversely related? We know that today we're paying far less attention to far more information, whether it's truthful or not. Are we overwhelmed by what we know? Or worse, are we apathetic about what we know? Or even worse, are we already sure about what we know? Now, whether we're overwhelmed, apathetic, or sure, should we devote less or more of our diminishing attention span, that 8 seconds, to the search for truth? Do we value fast truth over slow truth? Are we meant to find our important personal truths instantly or by inches? I want to leave you tonight with 2 brief illustrations of our question. 2 unique historical examples of truth by inches. They are really examples of the contrast between fast truth and slow truth that might just prompt you to revisit your own path to truth. This is the Codex Gigas Bible, sometimes called the Devil's Bible. It is the most unique, most studied, most dramatic example of 13th century medieval publishing. Now, I use the term publishing very loosely because in the 13th century, all books were painstakingly copied, lettered, and illustrated by hand. The Codex is 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 9 inches thick. It contains 320 pages of vellum, which is a thin handcrafted parchment, animal-based. Okay? As legend suggests, the vellum in the Codex was made from the skins of 160 young donkeys. It's reportedly the work of a single Benedictine monk named Herman the Recluse. Really, I'm not kidding. The best historical information suggests that it took Herman 30 years to produce this Bible. 30 years devoted to the copying of a single book. Hence, that's why he's Herman the Recluse, I guess. Now, there is an alternate story, a legend really, about the Codex's origin. It's connected to the mystery surrounding the unique full-page illustration of the devil. at the beginning of the book. The legend tells of Herman's discouragement over being assigned the monumental and holy task of copying this particular version of the Bible. Now, faced with the impossibility of completing the Bible in his lifetime, Herman was rumored to have made a pact with the devil. And he completed the work in a single night. And so, he had to commit to placing the devil's portrait at the beginning of the book. Now, we'll call these two conflicting origin stories yet another contrasting mystery of fast truth versus slow truth. It's an amazing book, though. So the Codex, along with every other manuscript in the Middle Ages, was copied in a special monastic chamber called a scriptorium. And these chambers were located where the large open windows would allow for optimal sunlight and maximum ventilation for monks who literally did nothing but sit and handwrite for most of their cloistered and often crippled lives. All across Europe, scriptoria were also depositories for new and existing manuscripts and books, the medieval equivalent of libraries. This is one preserved scriptorium in Europe. They were literary treasure houses, really, where all the written knowledge of the Western world was stored. Very few of these literary treasures have survived, which makes the Codex really, really unique. Now, we can be simultaneously amazed and horrified by the idea of anyone devoting 30 years to hand copying a book. Amazed and horrified, especially when we ponder the earlier reference that I made to our modern attention span, which is decidedly not 30 years. And I'm not suggesting that we adopt a Middle Ages vibe in our lives, except for perhaps the monastic philosophy that underlies the story of the Codex. Medieval monks believed that the act of copying literature, not just sacred literature, any kind of literature, was itself a deeply spiritual exercise. And the scriptorium was considered a deeply spiritual place. They believed that the singular time commitment, the attention to detail, devotion to duty, and even the physical toll suffered from the act of copying manuscripts was a unique path to personal truth. The monks believed that total immersion in every letter, every word, every punctuation mark, every sentence, every paragraph, every chapter, and every illustration was a slow, methodical journey to a much deeper truth inside the text. They believed that the devotion of the copier revealed a truth that a mere reader might never experience. It was their way of affirming slow truth over fast truth. I think this philosophy was their take on our modern expression. You should really read the book, not just see the movie. This was medieval truth by inches. Now, because we're a non-religious community, the Codex Gigas story is not about how we should engage every word of the Bible, or any other religious book for that matter. The Codex story is really about an extraordinary, sustained, slow commitment to engage truth itself. It's another metaphor, really, for asking a question about our own commitment to engage the important personal truths that we seek. Whether it be emotional truth, intellectual truth, philosophical truth, or spiritual truth. So now let's move from the 30-year attention span of Simon the Recluse and return to the 8-second attention span of modern hipster guy. It's amazing how many people he looks like, eh? It's crazy. If Simon the Recluse searched for truth by inches, what is the measure of our search for truth? Is there an equilibrium or a middle ground between the 13th and 21st centuries that doesn't make Simon's search for truth or our questions seem so outdated or absurd? Okay, allow me to share one more example, okay, a possible bridge between the 13th and 21st centuries, a possible justification for truth by inches that's relevant to us right now. Do you recognize these guys? Anybody? Okay. Not sure if you would. Sorry? Their names are Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Okay, in 1972, Woodward and Bernstein were young up-and-coming reporters working out of the city newsroom of the Washington Post. Even though their newspaper was situated in the center of U.S. politics, they were considered very junior. You can see they're pretty young there. Very low on the totem pole when it came to covering important political stories, which was kind of frustrating for any aspiring reporter, considering that it was Washington, D.C. after all. Now, the city desk of the Post mostly covered local news, okay, city council, municipal affairs, local crime. In June 1972, Bob Woodward got a routine assignment to cover the court appearance of several men who had been arrested during a burglary attempt at a local office building. Woodward had covered lots of local crime stories, but there was something a little different about this story that perhaps synchronistically, I have to get that word into every presentation, it nudged Woodward along the first few inches of a new path to truth. That's something a little different about this routine burglary was this. Of the 5 burglars arrested, 3 were former FBI or CIA agents, and the other 2 were Cuban exiles with anti-communist sympathies and ties to the CIA. They were caught breaking into the office of the U.S. Democratic National Committee, and the office was on the 6th floor of the Watergate building. Now, this routine local crime story that was tossed to Bob Woodward that day very quickly expanded a few more inches. And later that week, Carl Bernstein was assigned to collaborate with Woodward. What came next was one of the most important political stories in U.S. history. Now, I'm not going to share the detailed story of what took place after that. If you like, you can read about it in Woodward and Bernstein's book, All the President's Men, or in a very anti-monk sounding statement, you could just see the movie, okay, starring Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And then you too can ponder the obvious question of which famous actor would play you in a movie about your life. For my movie, I'm still trying to decide.
Hey Fred, is that you on the right?
Yeah. The detailed story of what took place in the Watergate scandal is not really what's important for our question tonight. What is important for our question is how the story was pursued, investigated, sourced, verified, criticized, opposed, debated, and finally established. First, as an important truth, and then as a powerful agent of change in the 20th century. What is equally important for our question is the challenge we face to diminish or even dismiss the notion of truth by inches, because we are automatically embarrassed or even a little repelled by what appears to be outdated or absurd. We want to be 60s hipster guy or gal. Goes something like this. I mean, why would someone devote 30 years of his life to hand copying the Bible? Oh yeah, that's what they did in the 13th century. Or old school newspapers like the Washington Post and old school journalists like Woodward and Bernstein are just fossils of a 20th century news media that's being outpaced and outscooped by advanced technology, social media, and real-time, on-the-scene reporting by anyone with a smartphone. We're not slaves anymore to the media establishment, and we no longer have to wait for their corporate proclamations from on high. The new media is all about freedom, choice, and speed, and attention span. Now, looking backward from 2017, it does seem a bit absurd, okay? In 1972, there was no internet, no social media. Computers, if anyone had them, resided in large rooms, not in the palm of our hands. Phones were only wired to desktops or walls and had rotary dials. Word processing was handwritten pads of paper and typewriters. Research took place in libraries and file rooms. This is actually a scene from the movie where Woodward and Bernstein were at the Library of Congress trying to find out what books staff from the White House had been withdrawing. They were just given a big, huge box of library withdrawal cards. They spent all night going through them. These were really 20th century scriptoria, really, where one's attention span had to be sustained and where no AI-driven search engines existed. Searches were driven by commitment. People were interviewed and questioned by voice or face-to-face. There was no email, no text, no software, no device to abbreviate reality and keep the real story at a safe arm's length from the search for truth. In 1972, not so unlike the 13th century, the truth about Watergate was pursued by inches. So step by slow step, from June 1972 to June 1973, Woodward and Bernstein painstakingly developed a remarkable, transformative story from the routine arrest of those local office burglars. Their persistent investigative reporting, done at the risk of their careers and even their lives, helped uncover an underlying web of conspiracy and criminality that led from the 5 Watergate burglars all the way to the President of the United States. In the year that followed, their reporting prompted a series of congressional investigations and ultimately criminal prosecutions that resulted in the impeachment and eventual resignation of President Richard Nixon in August of 1974. It's like a 2-year process. Nixon is the only president in the US history to have resigned from office because of this. Woodward and Bernstein pursued the truth by inches, and as a result, a deeper purpose was served. Is this kind of transformative personal search for truth still possible? I obviously can't answer that question for you, but let's briefly revisit the truth landscape that you, or Simon the Recluse, or Woodward and Bernstein, or hipster guy, would be facing today. So, as we revisit these points, ask yourself if this landscape is actually toxic to the pursuit of truth. This is our truth landscape today. The diminishing desire to read creative literature. The steady decline of conventional news organizations and professional journalism. The inevitable dominance of online information sourcing and social media journalism. The growing trend of obtaining conventional news from social media sources, and the rise of short-form social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The forms of social media are mimicking our attention spans. I don't know which one is driving the other. And of course, the last thing, human attention span, 8 seconds. That's the lens through which truth is viewed today. Now, let me bring a finer point to this question. If the 2017 versions of Woodward and Bernstein, they actually exist, by the way, today, were pursuing an important political truth by inches, and they were ready to bring this slow truth to us, would we believe them? I ask this question because of the 21st century reality of fast truth that would be competing for our sad attention span. It's just a sample of what's out there. Now, unfortunately, this avalanche of truth in an instant is not just a convenient contrasting point to my question for tonight. It is a real thing. It is a real thing right now, with real-world consequences, as we know. A significant percentage of the population now accepts this kind of truth as a foundation for their own personal truth, and often their personal vote. This kind of instant truth isn't just flooding over us in our politics, okay? Instant truth is a disturbing and sadly persuasive factor in all aspects of our search for truth, from science to social policy to spirituality. Climate change is a hoax. A mosque in Georgia keeps Hurricane Harvey donations, and they're going to send it to Syrian refugees instead. A Texas mosque refuses to help refugees because Allah forbids helping infidels. This one in the far upper left-hand corner, Donald Trump himself retweeted. He has 43 million Twitter followers. Searching for the truth by inches has never been more difficult than it is now. People who are willing to search for the truth by inches have never been more needed than they are now. As I wrote this presentation, I realized that actually this community is likely populated by the very people I just described. People interested in searching for the truth, who know that the deepest truths sometimes require the deepest and longest commitments to find them. Truth by inches. Now, I'm not suggesting that you disconnect from your electronic devices and your electronic relationships and join a monastery. Not saying that. Quite the opposite, actually. I will suggest a question, however, each time you tap or swipe to initiate a search or a connection with your community or to check whatever news feed you favor. You could question the difference between what you're being fed and what you wish to find. Or whether you believe that faster is freer. And then you could ask yourself if you're going to be the hare or the tortoise.